His Christmas mail-order bride arrives with a hidden talent that saves his struggling ranch. The winter wind cut across the Montana plains with a sharpness Luke McAllister swore he'd never get used to. He stood at the edge of his ranch, boots sinking into snow, staring at the sagging barn roof and the thinning cattle huddled against the cold. Every creak of the wood, every groan of the wind reminded him how close he was to losing the land his family had poured 3 generations into. And today, of all days, a stranger was arriving because he had been desperate enough to send a letter asking for a mail-order bride. Luke didn't know what frightened him more, the possibility she wouldn't show, or the possibility she actually would. A stagecoach crested the hill, wheels crunching through the snow. As it stopped, a woman stepped down with surprising grace, even though her boots sank almost instantly. She lifted her face to him, bright eyes, wind-reddened cheeks, and a courage that showed before she even spoke. "Luke McAllister?" she asked. "That'd be me," he answered, tugging his hat nervously. "I'm Elara James," she said, offering a small, hopeful smile. "Your Christmas bride." Luke swallowed. "Miss James. I should tell you right now, things aren't how I'd hoped they'd be when I wrote that letter. This ranch, well, it's in trouble." Elara tightened her grip on her small satchel. "Then it seems I arrived just in time." From the first day, Elara worked as though she'd been born to ranch life. She mended fences with nimble fingers, fixed meals that warmed the coldest evenings, and spoke with a softness that brought calm even when tempers ran high or when Luke's fears nearly got the best of him. But something about her puzzled him. She carried a worn leather case everywhere, but never opened it. And although she smiled often, a quiet sadness lived behind her eyes, the kind that came from losing more than anyone should. One night, after a long day of chopping ice from the water troughs, Luke finally asked, "Elara, what brought you here?" "Really?" She wrapped her hands around a mug of steaming tea. "I needed a new beginning. And you needed help. It seemed fair." "That's not an answer," Luke said gently. Elara looked into the fire, its glow dancing across her face. "My family owned a small traveling show. I was the headliner, the violinist. We went town to town, spreading a little joy wherever we could. But last Christmas Eve, our wagon crashed on a frozen bridge. I survived. My parents didn't." Luke's breath caught. "Elara, I'm so sorry." She nodded. "I stopped playing that night. Sold the show's instruments. Or, most of them." Her hand brushed her case, the one she never opened. "I came here," she whispered, "to find a place where silence didn't hurt as much." Luke didn't press further. But he understood then, her hidden pain, the shadows in her smile. And winter, relentless as ever, pressed on. A week before Christmas, Luke received the notice he'd been dreading, a final warning from the bank. He was behind on payments. Extensions had run out. If he couldn't bring in money soon, the ranch would be auctioned. That night, after supper, Luke sat with his head in his hands. Elara touched his shoulder. "Tell me what it says." "It says we're out of time," Luke murmured. "There's nothing left to sell, nothing left to fix. I don't know how to save this place." Elara straightened. Something sparked in her eyes, a mix of fear and determination. The same look, Luke suspected, she'd worn the night she survived her family's accident. "Maybe there is something," she said softly. "But you'll have to trust me." "Trust you with what?" Luke asked. Elara stood, clutching her leather case. "A part of myself I thought I'd buried." The next evening, the largest barn on the ranch glowed with lantern light. Luke had no idea what Elara had planned until neighbors began arriving in sleighs and wagons, bundled in scarves, carrying children and casseroles in curious expressions. "Elara invited us," Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring ranch explained. "Said there'd be music." "Music?" Luke echoed, baffled. Then he saw Elara climb a small wooden platform, open her worn leather case, and lift out a polished violin that looked loved even under the dust of sorrow. Luke's breath stopped. She lifted the bow, hesitated, fear trembling in her fingers, and then, with one deep breath, began to play. The first note was fragile, like a small bird unsure if its wings would hold. But the second note grew stronger. The third trembled with emotion. And soon, her music filled the barn, warm, soaring, heartbreakingly beautiful. It wrapped around the people gathered, around the rafters and lanterns, around Luke's trembling heart. She played carols and hymns, old folk tunes and bright jigs. Tears ran down the faces of the toughest ranch hands. Children rested their heads on their mothers' shoulders, mesmerized. And as the final melody, a song so tender it felt like a prayer, echoed across the barn, people stepped forward. "With all she's done for this community tonight, we'd be fools not to help," old Mr. Bennett said, slipping money into a tin bucket. Others followed. Some gave bills, some gave coins, some offered supplies, labor, repairs. By the end of the night, the bucket overflowed. Luke stared at Elara, overwhelmed. You saved the ranch." She shook her head, tears shining. "No. They did. I just gave them a reason to come." "You gave them hope," Luke whispered. "And you gave me something I thought I'd lost." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You gave me a future to believe in." Elara looked up at him, her heart finally unburdened. "And you gave me a place where silence isn't painful anymore." On Christmas morning, dawn broke in soft gold across the ranch. Luke and Elara stood on the porch, wrapped in one shared blanket as snow shimmered like a field of diamonds. "You think your parents would approve?" Luke asked. Elara smiled gently. "I think they'd say I found where I belong." Luke took her hand. "Then stay. Not because of the letter I wrote, but because of the life we can build." Elara squeezed his hand back. "I'm already home." Sometimes, the greatest miracles arrive quietly, carried in a stagecoach, wrapped in courage, armed with a song powerful enough to rebuild broken things. And that Christmas, hope didn't just return to the McAllister ranch. It began there, spreading from one act of bravery, one act of love, to warm an entire winter.